Alone no more, humanity stands with the forgotten alien race. 6 months passed on New Aotearoa. The Velryn were rebuilding their lives with remarkable speed. Villages grew across the islands, beautiful structures that blended human and Velryn design. Gardens flourished with plants from two worlds growing side by side. Children, both human and Velryn, played together in schools where they learned both cultures. Elder Nira established the Hall of Memory in the center of the main settlement. It was a living monument, walls covered in light paintings that told the story of the Velryn people. Every visitor could see the beauty of what was lost and understand why it must never happen again. Thousands of humans came to visit, to learn, to remember. But while peace grew on Earth, tension built in space. The Galactic Council's sanctions were hurting some human colonies. Trade had slowed. Technology that Earth needed was being withheld. Some politicians started questioning whether helping the Velryn had been worth the cost. Then the Korath made their move. A battle fleet of 30 ships appeared at the edge of Earth's solar system. They did not attack, not yet. Instead, they sent a message. The Korath commander, War Master Thorak, demanded to speak with Earth's leaders. President He Jin took the call in the government command center. Admiral Sung Ho stood beside her, along with military advisors and diplomats. The screen showed Thorak, a massive being covered in armored scales, his eyes cold and calculating. The Velryn are Korath property, Thorak stated bluntly. During the war, they stole classified military technology. We demand their immediate return for trial and punishment. It was obviously a lie. Everyone knew it. The Velryn were artists and philosophers, not thieves. But the lie gave the Korath legal cover for their demands. The Galactic Council, dominated by powers uncomfortable with Earth's defiance, had tacitly approved this action. Hea Jin kept her voice calm and steady. The Velryn are citizens of Earth now. They are under our protection. We will not surrender them. Thorak's expression did not change. You have 48 hours to comply. If you refuse, we will take them by force. Your fleet is small. Your technology is inferior. You cannot win this fight. Be reasonable. The screen went dark. Silence filled the command center. Everyone understood what had just happened. The Korath had given Earth a choice. Surrender the Velryn or face war against a superior force. Admiral Sung Ho immediately began issuing orders. Every military ship in range was recalled to Earth. Defenses around the planet and New Aotearoa were strengthened. But the numbers were brutal. Earth could muster maybe 10 warships. The Korath had 30, each more advanced and better armed. News of the ultimatum spread quickly. Panic hit some areas. People demanded the government negotiate, give the Korath what they wanted, avoid war. But other voices rose in opposition. Larger voices. Louder voices. Ara, the student whose video had helped start everything, posted another message. If we surrender the Velryn now, what did any of it mean? We told them they were not alone. We promised them safety. If we break that promise when it gets difficult, then we are no better than the council that abandoned them. We stand or we fall, but we do not betray. Across Earth, millions agreed. Protests filled the streets, but these were not protests against the government. They were rallies supporting the decision to stand firm. People knew war might come. They were afraid, but they were more afraid of what humanity would become if they abandoned the Velryn. On New Aotearoa, the Velryn learned about the threat. Elder Nira called an emergency meeting. She stood before her people and humans who had come to live among them. Her voice was heavy with sorrow. We cannot let humans die for us, she said. We have already lost everything once. We cannot bear the weight of your deaths too. I propose we surrender ourselves to the Korath. We will tell Earth that we are leaving by our own choice. The room erupted in shouting. Humans and Velryn both rejected the idea. Salis stood up, her young voice cutting through the noise. Elder Nira, with respect, you are wrong. We are not the same people who went into stasis 300 years ago. We are Velryn, yes, but we are also Earth citizens now. This is our home too. We fight for it. We do not run and hide anymore. Other Velryn nodded. They had been victims once, helpless and abandoned, but they were not helpless now. They had a home worth defending and people who stood with them. Deho spoke up from the back of the room. Besides, we might have something the Korath do not expect. The Velryn know stellar engineering, right? And we humans are pretty good at improvising. Working together, maybe we can level the field a bit. That sparked an idea. Elder Nira looked at Deho with sudden understanding. The Velrin had ancient knowledge of how to manipulate stellar harmonics, energy fields that existed around every star. It was technology they had never weaponized because that was not who they were, but it could be used defensively. Over the next 40 hours, Velrin scientists and human engineers worked frantically. They designed a system using the crystalline deposits on New Aotearoa as a massive resonator. It would not destroy ships, but it could disrupt weapon systems and propulsion within a certain range. It was a defensive miracle, but it had never been tested at this scale. Captain Tae Yang was given command of Earth's defense fleet. It was a recognition of everything he had done. He stood on the bridge of his new flagship, looking at the faces of his crew. Hana was there, now a squadron leader. June commanded a medical vessel that would stay back from the fighting. Deho had insisted on being aboard to monitor the resonator system. The 48 hours expired. The Korath fleet moved forward. Admiral Sung Ho broadcast one final message, both to the Korath and to the rest of the galaxy. We are human. We make mistakes. We are not perfect, but when we say someone is under our protection, we mean it. When we promise that no one will be forgotten, we keep that promise. The Velrin are our people now. If you want them, you will have to go through us. The Korath fleet accelerated toward Earth. War Master Thorak sent no reply. He believed human defiance was foolish pride that would collapse under real pressure. He was wrong. The battle began at the edge of Earth's solar system. Korath ships were faster and more powerful, just as everyone had known they would be. They opened fire first. Energy weapons cutting through space toward the human vessels. But Tae Yang had learned a few things from Salus. He used Velrin navigation techniques to predict Korath movements based on stellar harmonics. His fleet scattered in patterns that looked random, but were actually carefully calculated. Many Korath shots missed their intended targets. Human ships returned fire. Their weapons were less powerful, but they aimed for specific systems. Communication arrays, sensor equipment, propulsion units. They were not trying to destroy the Korath fleet. They were trying to blind and slow it. The battle raged for 3 hours. Human ships took heavy damage. 2 were destroyed, their crews lost. Tae Yang felt each death like a knife in his heart, but his fleet held formation, drawing the Korath closer to Earth, closer to New Aotearoa. Thorak grew frustrated. The humans were putting up more resistance than expected. He ordered his fleet into a tight formation for a final overwhelming assault. It was exactly what the humans had been waiting for. Deho activated the resonator. The crystalline deposits across New Aotearoa lit up with brilliant light. Energy pulsed outward in a wave that human sensors could barely detect, but which Korath instruments could not ignore. Harmonic frequencies crashed into the Korath fleet like an invisible tsunami. Weapon systems failed. Propulsion drives sputtered and died. Communication between Korath ships dissolved into static. In seconds, the entire Korath fleet was paralyzed, floating helplessly in space. Tae Yang's fleet surrounded them immediately. Every human weapon locked onto Korath vessels. The humans could destroy the fleet right now. The Korath were completely at their mercy. Thorak knew it too. He waited for the killing blow, for revenge for the 2 human ships he had destroyed. But the blow did not come. Instead, Tae Yang's voice came over the communication channel. War Master Thorak, your fleet is disabled but intact. Your crews are alive. I'm offering you terms. Leave Earth space now. Return to Korath territory. Tell your leaders and tell the Council that the Velrin are under Earth's protection. If anyone comes for them again, we will defend them again. But we do not want more death. Leave in peace and we will let you go. Silence. Long silence. Thorak could not believe what he was hearing. Humans had the advantage. They could eliminate the Korath fleet. Instead, they were offering mercy. Why? Thorak asked, his voice confused and angry. You could destroy us. We killed your people. Why show mercy? Tae Yang thought about that question. He thought about the Velrin, forgotten and written off as unimportant. He thought about what humanity wanted to prove to the galaxy. Because we can, Tae Yang answered simply. Because choosing mercy when we have power is what makes us human. Because we remember that even our enemies are people. Go home, Thorak. Tell everyone what happened here. Tell them Earth keeps its promises. The Korath fleet limped away, systems slowly coming back online as they moved out of resonator range. Thorak said nothing more, but his face showed something that might have been respect or might have been shame. Alone no more, Humanity stands with the forgotten alien race. The first human ships arrived at the Velrin station like a fleet of guardian angels. Captain Taeyang watched from the station's observation deck as vessel after vessel dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Transports, hospital ships, supply carriers, and yes, a few warships too, just in case someone tried to interfere. But more than the ships themselves, it was what they represented that made Elder Nira weep. Each ship carried volunteers, doctors who had left their practices, engineers who had abandoned lucrative jobs, teachers, technicians, pilots, and ordinary people who simply wanted to help. Over 10,000 humans had come to bring the Velrin home. Dr. June coordinated the medical teams. Waking 12,000 people from 300-year stasis was not going to be easy. Many would be weak. Some might not survive the process. Every pod had to be carefully monitored, every Velrin given time to adjust to consciousness. The first day, they woke 50 Velrin. June and his team worked carefully, checking vital signs, administering nutrients, helping confused and frightened people understand they were finally safe. The Velrin who woke were disoriented. Some thought they had only been asleep for days. When they learned the truth, that 3 centuries had passed, the grief was terrible to witness. But there was something else too. Hope. When they saw humans, working to save them. When they understood that an entire planet had voted to help them, something changed in their eyes. The despair began to lift. Hana spent her time with Salis and other young Velrin who were healthy enough to move around. She showed them the human ships, let them sit in pilot seats, and taught them about the controls. Salis was fascinated. Velrin ships had been organic designs, grown rather than built. Human ships were different, but the principles of flight remained the same. You fly with your heart, Salis told Hana through the translator. You do not just calculate courses. You feel them. That is good. That is how Velrin fly too. The two of them developed a friendship that went beyond words. They flew simulations together, competing to see who could navigate asteroid fields faster. Usually, Salis won. Her people's ability to sense stellar harmonics gave her an edge, but Hana was learning, and Salis was a patient teacher. Daeho worked with Velrin engineers on a critical problem. The station's systems were failing. They could not keep it running long enough to wake everyone safely. So instead of trying to repair it, they started carefully dismantling it. Piece by piece, they took apart sections and loaded them onto transport ships. Technology, art, cultural artifacts, everything that mattered to the Velrin was carefully preserved. The Velrin engineers taught Daeho their methods. They showed him how to build machines that worked with natural energy flows instead of fighting them. It was revolutionary. Daeho took careful notes, knowing this knowledge could change human technology forever. 3 weeks into the evacuation, tragedy struck. One of the stasis pods malfunctioned during the waking process. The Velrin inside, an elder named Cass, did not survive. It was the first death and it hit everyone hard. The medical team blamed themselves. June especially was devastated. But Elder Nira stopped him from drowning in guilt. She held his hands and spoke gently. Cass died knowing we were finally found. He died knowing someone cared. For 300 years we thought we would die forgotten. You gave him something better. You gave him hope in his final moments. That is a gift beyond measure. The evacuation continued. Every day, more Velrin woke. Every day the human teams worked tirelessly. They ate meals together, humans and Velrin sharing food and stories. The language barriers were falling. Translators got better as they gathered more data. Soon conversations flowed more naturally. Children were the first to truly connect. Young Velrin and human kids did not care about politics or history. They just wanted to play. The station's empty corridors echoed with laughter for the first time in centuries. Human children taught Velrin children games from Earth. Velrin children showed humans how to create patterns with bioluminescent paint. After 6 weeks, the last Velrin was woken. 12,000 beings, now all conscious, all aware they were being saved. The station was empty of life. just a shell waiting to drift into the dying star. But everything important had been saved. The fleet turned toward Earth, specifically toward the islands of New Aotearoa in the Pacific. The journey would take 3 weeks. During that time, June and his team worked to help the Velryn adjust. Physical therapy for atrophied muscles, counseling for the psychological trauma of losing everything, education about the current galaxy and how much had changed. Elder Nira learned about Earth during the journey. She studied human history with fascination and horror. She saw the wars, the cruelty, the times humans had failed each other. But she also saw the art, the music, the moments of incredible kindness. She saw a species that struggled between its better and worse nature, and kept choosing to be better. "You are young," she told Captain Tae Yang one evening as they looked at stars through a viewport. "Your species is so young compared to most in the galaxy, but you have something many older races have lost. You still believe things can be better. You still try." Tae Yang smiled. "We make a lot of mistakes. We do not always get it right." "No one does," Nira replied. "But you showed up. When the whole galaxy forgot us, you came. That matters more than you know." The news of Earth's actions spread through the galaxy. The reaction was divided. Some civilizations were inspired, others were angry. The Korath Empire was furious. They sent formal protests to Earth, claiming the Velryn were hiding stolen technology. It was an obvious lie, but it gave them an excuse to make threats. The Galactic Council imposed sanctions on Earth. Trade routes were restricted. Technology exchanges were halted. Some human colonies on the frontier panicked, worried about being cut off from supplies. But Earth's government remained firm. They had made a promise, and they would keep it. Then something unexpected happened. 3 alien civilizations announced they were breaking ranks with the Council's decision. The Threxians, the Delphis, and the Orvathi all issued statements supporting Earth. They offered to open trade with humanity and provide the technology exchanges the Council had cut off. It was not just charity. These civilizations had their own reasons. They had all been marginalized by the Council's major powers. They had all been told they did not matter enough. Earth's stand for the Velryn reminded them they did not have to accept being dismissed. A new coalition was forming quietly but surely. The minor powers of the galaxy were finding their voice. Finally, after 3 weeks of travel, the fleet arrived at Earth. The planet hung in space like a blue jewel. For the Velryn, who had not seen a living world in 3 centuries, it was overwhelming. Many cried. Some could not speak. They had survived so long in the darkness, and now there was this, a whole planet full of life and light. The ships descended toward New Aotearoa. The islands had been prepared for months. Homes were built using a combination of human and Velryn architectural designs. Gardens were planted with earth plants and modified flora that would support Velryn dietary needs. Crystalline deposits, necessary for Velryn health, were carefully cultivated in the soil. As the first transport touched down, thousands of humans waited to greet them. Not soldiers or officials, just ordinary people. They held signs of welcome. They had prepared food and gifts. Children waved flags showing both Earth and newly designed Velryn symbols. Elder Nira was the first to step off the transport. Her feet touched solid ground for the first time in 300 years. The soil was real. The air was fresh. The sun was warm. She fell to her knees and wept. Around her, other Velryn emerged from the ships. They stumbled, overwhelmed by sensation. Real wind, real sunlight, the feel of grass beneath their feet. Some laughed, some cried, some just stood in stunned silence. Human families approached them with gentle welcomes. "We are glad you are here," they said. "Welcome home," Salas found Hana in the crowd. The two embraced, and Hana whispered, "You made it. You are really here." "We are here," Salas agreed, her voice full of wonder. "We are really here." That night, the first night on their new home, the Velryn gathered on the beach. They created light paintings in the air. bioluminescent art that told stories of their lost worlds. Humans watched in awe as the night sky filled with glowing images. Elder Nira stood before her people and spoke. We were forgotten. We were lost. We thought we would die alone in the dark. But we were found. Not by those who claimed to lead the galaxy, not by the powerful or the mighty. We were found by a young species who remembered what it meant to care. We were found by humans who proved that being strong means standing for those who cannot stand alone. We are home. Finally, we are home. The Velrin cheered. The humans cheered with them. And above them the stars shone bright, witnesses to the moment when the forgotten were finally remembered. Alone no more. Humanity stands with the forgotten alien race. The news spread across Earth like wildfire. Within hours of Captain Tae Yang's transmission, every screen on the planet showed images of the Velrin station. People watched as the cameras showed thousands of stasis pods holding the last survivors of a dead civilization. The story was everywhere, impossible to ignore. President Hae-jin sat in her office watching the public reaction with growing concern. Her advisors crowded around her, all talking at once. The military leaders wanted caution. The economic team warned about costs. The diplomatic corps was already receiving angry messages from the Galactic Council. The Council had made their position clear within 6 hours. A formal communication arrived, cold and bureaucratic. The message stated that the Velrin situation was a closed matter from 3 centuries ago. Earth had no authority to interfere with historical council decisions. Any attempt to aid the Velrin would be seen as a political statement against council authority. Behind that diplomatic language, the threat was obvious. Help the Velrin and face consequences. But something was happening on Earth that the politicians had not expected. The people were not waiting for their leaders to decide. In every major city, crowds gathered in the streets. They held signs with simple messages. Remember them. Never forgotten. We stand together. A young college student named Ara recorded a message in her apartment and posted it online. She was not famous or important, just a normal person, but her words struck something deep in the human heart. My grandparents were refugees, Ara said to her camera. They fled war and were told nobody wanted them. They were called a burden, a problem. But someone gave them a chance. Someone remembered they were people. And now I am here because someone cared. How can we do less for the Velrin? How can we be the ones who forget? The video went viral. Within a day, 50 million people had watched it. Then 100 million, then more. People from every nation, every background, all saying the same thing. Help them, remember them. Do not be the ones who turn away. Admiral Sung Ho watched all of this from his office at Fleet Command. He was Earth's highest-ranking military officer, a career soldier who had seen combat and understood the cost of war. He knew the Galactic Council's threat was real. The Korath Empire, now a respected council member after their supposed reforms, would see Earth's actions as an insult. But Sung Ho also understood something else. He understood what it meant to be human, and if humanity stood by and did nothing, if they let the Velrin continue to be forgotten, then something important would die. Something that made humans worth reaching for the stars in the first place. He picked up his secure communicator and started making calls. Quiet calls to people he trusted, Ambassador Min, who worked with the smaller alien civilizations, Captain Tae Yang still at the Velrin station, engineers, medical personnel, logistics experts. He was building something carefully and quietly. Meanwhile, at the Velrin station, Tae Yang's crew was learning more about the people they had found. Elder Nira took them through the station, showing them what remained of Velrin culture. The walls were covered in light paintings, art created by manipulating bioluminescence. Even after 300 years, some of them still glowed faintly. June spent his time studying Velrin biology. He was amazed by their crystalline bone structure. It was not fragile like it looked. Instead, it could store and redirect energy, including light. The Velrin had evolved on a world where being able to absorb and use light energy was crucial for survival. They were living art, biology, and beauty combined. Hana bonded with a young Velrin who had woken from stasis. Her name was Salis, and before the war she had been training to be a pilot. Hana showed her human flight techniques on a simulator. Salis showed Hana Velrin navigation methods that used the harmonics of stars themselves. Despite not sharing a language at first, They communicated through their shared love of flying. Daeho worked with Velrun engineers on repairing critical station systems. He was surprised to discover that Velrun technology was different from both human and council standard designs. They built machines that worked with natural systems instead of against them. It was elegant and efficient in ways that made Daeho rethink everything he knew about engineering. Back on Earth, President Haijin faced a decision. The global parliament was preparing to vote on whether to officially offer the Velrun sanctuary. The debate had been fierce. Those against argued that Earth could not afford to antagonize the Galactic Council. Humanity was still a young spacefaring civilization. They needed trade, alliances, access to council technology. Helping the Velrun risked all of that. Those in favor argued something different. They said this was not about politics or economics. It was about who humanity wanted to be. If they turned away from the Velrun, if they chose convenience over conscience, then what did their civilization stand for? The night before the vote, Hyejin could not sleep. She walked through the empty halls of the government building, thinking about the weight of her office. Whatever Parliament decided, the galaxy would judge humanity by this choice. There would be no going back. She found herself in the building's observation room, staring up at the stars. Somewhere up there, 12,000 Velrun waited to learn if they would be forgotten again. 300 years they had slept, hoping someone would care. Ambassador Min's voice came over her communicator. He had news. 3 alien civilizations had quietly reached out to him. The Threxians, an insectoid species. The Delphis, aquatic beings. The Orvathi, silicon-based life forms. All of them were minor powers in the galaxy. Often ignored by the bigger civilizations, all of them said the same thing. If Earth stood for the Velrun, they would stand with Earth. They remembered what it was like to be considered unimportant. They remembered being dismissed and ignored, and they were tired of it. The vote came the next day. Parliament Hall was packed with representatives from every Earth nation. The galleries were full of citizens who had come to witness history. The debate lasted for hours. Passionate speeches on both sides. Arguments about duty and safety and the future of humanity. Finally, President Haijin stood to speak. The hall fell silent. Everyone knew this moment would define her presidency and possibly humanity's place in the galaxy. For 300 years, she began, the Velrun have been alone. Their civilization destroyed. Their people scattered and dying. They asked for help and were told they did not matter enough to save. They were erased from the records and forgotten. 300 years of waiting in the dark, hoping someone would remember they existed. She paused, looking around at every representative, every face in the crowd. We spent centuries asking if we were alone in the universe. We built telescopes and sent signals into space, desperate to know if anyone else was out there. We wanted to matter. We wanted to be seen and heard and remembered. How can we, knowing that desire, do anything less than remember the Velrun? How can we be the ones who calculate the value of lives and decide some people are not worth saving? Her voice grew stronger. The Council warns us of consequences. They are right. There will be consequences. Trade may suffer. Alliances may fray. We may face opposition from powerful forces. But there are worse things than economic hardship. There are worse things than political isolation. The worst thing would be to look at ourselves in the mirror and see a civilization that forgot its humanity in the pursuit of convenience. The vote was called. Representatives pressed their buttons. The count appeared on the main screen. Green lights for yes, red lights for no. The green overwhelmed the red. The chamber erupted in applause. Some cheered. Some cried. Some simply sat in stunned silence at what they had just done. Earth had made its choice. The Velrun would be offered sanctuary, citizenship, and full protection. Humanity would stand for them regardless of the cost. Within minutes, the message went out to the galaxy. Earth's position was clear and public. The Velrun were not forgotten anymore. They had 12,000 new reasons to hope and an entire planet that refused to let them be alone. Admiral Sung-Ho smiled as he read the vote results. He activated his communicator and gave the orders he had been preparing for days. Begin Operation Homecoming. Bring our people home, all of them. Across human space, ships began to move toward the void sectors. Not warships, though those would come too. These were transport ships, medical vessels, supply carriers. Hundreds of them, crewed by volunteers who had signed up the moment they heard about the Velrun. At the station, Elder Nira received the news with tears streaming down her glowing face. After 300 years of darkness, there was finally light. After 3 centuries of being forgotten, someone remembered. The Velrin were alone no more. Alone no more, humanity stands with the forgotten alien race. The stars looked different in the void sectors. Captain Taeyang had been flying through space for 15 years, but this region always made him uncomfortable. Most captains avoided these areas. There was nothing here worth finding, or so everyone said. Just empty space, dying stars, and the occasional rock floating in the darkness. But Taeyang was not most captains. When his sensors picked up strange energy readings 3 days ago, he decided to investigate. His crew thought he was crazy. The energy signature was probably just radiation from the old star nearby. But something in his gut told him to keep looking. Now standing on the bridge of the Horizon's Promise, Taeyang stared at his view screen in complete shock. His pilot Hana had stopped talking mid-sentence. Even Dae-ho, the engineer who never stopped complaining, was silent. Nobody could believe what they were seeing. A massive station floated in front of them. It was huge, maybe 5 times the size of Earth's largest space city. The structure was old, very old. Parts of it were damaged, with hull breaches and broken sections spinning slowly in the void. But it was still there, still somehow functioning after who knew how many years. Yuna, the communications officer, was the first to speak. Her voice shook slightly as she reported her findings. The station was putting out a distress signal, but it was in a language their computers did not recognize. The signal was weak, barely there, like a whisper from a ghost. Taeyang made his decision quickly. They would board the station. His crew exchanged worried glances, but nobody argued. That was why he trusted them. They knew when to question orders and when to trust their captain. The docking process took 2 hours. The station's systems were barely working, and Hana had to manually guide their ship into an old docking port. When they finally made contact, the entire ship shuddered. Dae-ho immediately started checking for hull damage while Jun, their medical officer, prepared his equipment. Nobody knew what they would find inside. The airlock opened with a horrible screeching sound. The air that came out was stale but breathable. The station's life support was still working somehow. The team moved forward slowly, weapons ready, lights cutting through the darkness. The corridors were empty and silent. Their footsteps echoed in the metal hallways. Strange writing covered the walls, symbols that looked almost like art. The architecture was beautiful despite the decay. Whoever built this place cared about more than just function. They cared about beauty too. They walked for 20 minutes before they found the first chamber. It was enormous, stretching up so high that their lights could not reach the ceiling. And filling the chamber, row after row, were thousands of pods. Stasis pods. Jun moved to the nearest pod and wiped away the dust on the glass. He gasped. Inside was a person. Not human, but definitely a person. The being had pale blue skin that seemed to glow faintly. Their bone structure was visible beneath the skin. Not like bones, but like crystal formations that caught the light. They were beautiful and alien and completely unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. Taeyang moved from pod to pod. They were all occupied. Thousands of beings, all in stasis, all waiting. But waiting for what? And for how long? Dae-ho found a control panel and managed to access the station's computer system. The language was unknown, but their translation software started working on it. Slowly, painfully slowly, words began to make sense. The species was called the Velrin. The station was called Last Hope, and it had been floating here for 300 years. Taeyang felt cold despite his suit's heating system. 300 years. These people had been sleeping for 300 years in this forgotten corner of space. Yuna called out from across the chamber. She had found something else, another control system. This one seemed different, more important. The translation was clearer here, and what it said made Taeyang's blood run cold. Population before stasis, 7 billion. Population in stasis, 12,000. Status forgotten, hope. Zero Jun was already working on one of the pods before Taeyang could stop him. The medical officer had made a decision. If these people had been waiting for 300 years, they had waited long enough. He would wake one of them. The pod opened with a hiss of ancient mechanisms. The Velrin inside did not move at first. Then slowly their eyes opened. They were silver, those eyes, like polished metal. They looked around the chamber with confusion, then fear, then something like despair. Tae-yang stepped forward, hands open and empty, showing he meant no harm. He did not know if this being would understand, but he had to try. The Velryn looked at him for a long moment, studying his face, his species, his intent. Then the Velryn spoke. The words were foreign, musical, and sad, but the translation software caught them. The words appeared on everyone's display screens. Has the council finally come for us? Tae-yang did not know what council the Velryn meant. He shook his head slowly. The Velryn's expression changed, and the glow beneath their skin dimmed. They looked even sadder now. Then we are still forgotten, the Velryn said. Over the next hours, Tae-yang and his crew learned the terrible truth. The Velryn were once a great civilization spread across 7 worlds. They were artists, philosophers, peaceful traders who believed in beauty and knowledge. Then the Korath Empire came. The Korath wanted the Velryn's worlds and resources. The Velryn appealed to the Galactic Council for help. The council debated. They discussed. They formed committees, and while they talked, the Korath destroyed everything. By the time the council decided to act, there was nothing left to save. 7 worlds burned, 7 billion Velryn dead. Only these 12,000 survived, and they did so only because they ran and hid in this forgotten place. The Velryn elder, who introduced herself as Nira, told them all of this with a voice that held centuries of pain. She told them how the council eventually decided the Velryn were not worth defending. Too few in number, not strategically important. The decision was made to let them fade into history, so the Velryn went into stasis. They hoped that someday someone would find them, someone who would care. But 300 years passed and nobody came. They were erased from the records, forgotten by the galaxy. Tae-yang listened to all of this with growing horror. His crew stood silent, faces showing shock and disgust. This was wrong. Everything about this was wrong. Hana was crying quietly. June looked angry in a way Tae-yang had never seen. Even Daiho, who usually joked about everything, looked sick. Tae-yang activated his communicator. He was supposed to report any discoveries to Earth Command immediately and await orders. That was protocol. But as he looked at Elder Nira, at the thousands of pods holding the last of an entire civilization, he made a different choice. Horizons promised to Earth Command, he said clearly. We have found survivors, 12,000 beings who need immediate help. We will not be awaiting orders. We are bringing them home. His crew nodded in agreement. Elder Nira looked at Tae-yang with surprise and something that might have been hope. She asked him why. Why would humans help when the entire galaxy had turned away? Tae-yang thought about Earth's history, about the times humans had been cruel and the times they had been kind, about refugees and forgotten people and all the times someone should have helped but did not. Because no one should be alone, Tae-yang said simply, not anymore. Alone no more. Humanity stands with the forgotten alien race. The Battle of New Aotearoa changed everything. Within days, the entire galaxy knew what had happened. A young species had stood against a superior military force and won. Not through overwhelming firepower or advanced weapons, but through innovation, cooperation, and something the galaxy had not seen in a long time, the willingness to show mercy to a defeated enemy. War Master Thorak returned to Korath space in disgrace. But he did something unexpected. He told his leaders the complete truth about what happened. He described how the humans and Velryn worked together to create a defense neither could have built alone. He talked about being offered mercy when destruction would have been justified. The Korath Empire, built on strength and domination, did not know how to respond to that. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. For 3 centuries, they had functioned as a system where power determined importance. Strong civilizations made the rules. Weak ones followed or were ignored. The Velryn had been ignored because saving them was not convenient. Now that decision was being questioned by civilizations across the galaxy. Ambassador Min attended the session, representing Earth. He stood before the council chambers filled with representatives from hundreds of worlds. Some were hostile. Many were curious. A few were openly supportive. Earth does not claim to be perfect, Min stated clearly. Our history is filled with mistakes and cruelties. But we learned something important. Forgotten people do not simply disappear. Their suffering does not become less real because we choose not to see it. The Velryn were written off as a closed matter. 12,000 lives deemed not worth the inconvenience of saving. We could not accept that. We will not accept that. Not ever. His words resonated with many smaller civilizations. The Threxians, Delphus, and Orvathi had already sided with Earth. Now others joined them. The Prian Collective, a network of mining worlds often dismissed by the Council. The Sylvan Union, plant-based life forms considered too slow and passive to matter. The nomadic fleets, spacefaring peoples with no home planets and therefore no council representation, they all had something in common. They had all been told in various ways that they were not important enough to have a real voice in galactic affairs. Earth's stand for the Velrin reminded them that importance was not something granted by the powerful. It was something inherent in being alive. A new coalition formed, calling itself the Alliance of Remembered Worlds. It started with just a few civilizations but grew quickly. Within months, over 40 species had joined. They demanded reforms to the Galactic Council, equal representation, fair trade, an end to determining a civilization's value based solely on military or economic power. The Council resisted at first, but something had changed in the galaxy's consciousness. Citizens of even the major civilizations started questioning the old system, young people especially, who had watched humans risk everything for people they had just met, wondered why their own governments had stood by while the Velrin suffered. On Earth and New Aotearoa, life continued to grow and change. The Velrin population reached 50,000 as more survivors were gradually awakened from damaged stasis pods that human Velrin medical teams learned to repair. Children were being born, the first generation of Velrin to know only peace and safety. Dr. June won the Nobel Prize for his pioneering work in cross-species medicine. His research combining human and Velrin medical knowledge led to breakthroughs that helped multiple species. He was old now, his hair gray, but he still worked every day in his clinic where humans and Velrin came for treatment. When asked about his greatest achievement, Yoon did not mention the prize or the scientific papers. He talked about a young Velrin child named Kira, who had been born with a rare genetic condition. Using combined medical knowledge from both species, he had saved her life. That is what matters, he said. Not the awards or recognition. Just knowing that child gets to grow up and live a full life. Hana became an admiral, commanding a joint human-Velrin fleet dedicated to humanitarian missions. Her best friend Salas served as her second-in-command. Together they led rescue operations across the galaxy. When natural disasters struck, when civilizations needed help, their fleet responded. They saved thousands of lives and never asked if those lives were important enough to matter. The fleet became famous across the galaxy. But more importantly, it became a symbol. When Hana and Salas stood together on their bridge, one human and one Velrin working in perfect coordination, they showed what cooperation could achieve. Deho published his research on Velrin engineering principles. The knowledge spread throughout human space and beyond. Buildings that used less energy, ships that flew more efficiently, technology that worked with natural systems instead of fighting them. The Velrin gift of knowledge transformed human industry and was freely shared with other species. Captain Taeyang eventually retired from active service. He returned to New Aotearoa and built a small house on the beach. He spent his days teaching at the academy where human and Velrin students learned together. He never considered himself a hero, just someone who made the right choice when it mattered. But the galaxy remembered him differently. Statues were built, songs were written. His decision to report finding the Velrin and bring them home, despite orders to wait, was taught in schools across dozens worlds as an example of moral courage. Elder Nira lived to see her people flourish again. In her final years, she worked on the Hall of Memory, ensuring every Velrin story was preserved. She recorded everything about their lost worlds, their culture, their history. Nothing would be forgotten again. On her deathbed, surrounded by both Velrin and human loved ones, she spoke her final words to a young student who would carry on her work. "We were forgotten," Nira said softly. "For 300 years we were forgotten. Then we were remembered, not because we were valuable to some empire, not because we had resources they wanted. We were remembered because we were people. Humanity taught us that lesson. That is what you must never forget. Every person matters. Every life has value. Every voice deserves to be heard. That is the gift humans gave us. That is the gift we must give to others." She passed peacefully that night, her crystalline structure glowing softly one last time before dimming forever. Thousands attended her memorial. humans and Velrun and dozens of other species who had been inspired by her story. 20 years after the Battle of New Aotearoa, President Hyejin attended the dedication of a new monument in the center of the capital. It showed a human and a Velrun standing together, hands reaching toward the stars. The inscription read, "No one stands alone." The ceremony was attended by representatives from the Alliance of Remembered Worlds, now over 80 civilizations strong. They had succeeded in reforming the Galactic Council. Power was more distributed. Voices that had been ignored for centuries now helped shape galactic policy. It was not perfect and there was still far to go, but progress was being made. During the ceremony, Hyejin gave a speech reflecting on everything that had happened. 20 years ago, we faced a choice: help the Velrun and face consequences, or turn away and maintain our comfortable position in the galaxy. We chose to help. That choice cost us. We lost ships and lives. We faced sanctions and threats, but we gained something far more valuable. We gained proof that humanity could be more than just another species competing for power. We could be a force for good. She gestured to the crowd where humans and Velrun stood together, along with Threxians, Delphis, Orvathi, and dozens of other species. This is our legacy, not conquest, not dominance, connection, community. The simple truth that no one should face the universe alone. The Velrun taught us about resilience and hope. We taught them about standing together. Together we are teaching the galaxy that there is a better way. That evening, celebrations continued across New Aotearoa. The beaches were filled with people of many species, sharing food and music and stories. Velrun light paintings filled the sky, showing the history of their people from tragedy to hope to renewal. Taeyang sat on his favorite spot on the beach, watching the celebration. Silas found him there, now middle-aged herself, her bioluminescence still bright. She sat beside him in comfortable silence for a while. "Do you ever regret it?" Silas asked. "Everything that happened. The costs. The consequences." Taeyang thought about that question. He thought about the ships lost in battle, the political struggles, the years of tension and uncertainty. Then he looked at the celebration in front of them. Children playing together, families of different species laughing together, a galaxy slowly learning to be better. "No," he said simply. "I regret the lives lost. I regret we could not save everyone, but I do not regret the choice." "How could I? Look at what that choice became." Salis smiled, her crystalline bones catching the light. "My mother told me something before she passed. She said the humans did not just save the Velrun. They saved the idea that saving people matters at all. In a galaxy that had forgotten how to care, you remembered. That changed everything." They sat together as the celebration continued around them. Above, ships from 100 worlds arrived for the annual Unity Festival.